Well, hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Buckeye Fever podcast. I'm Dave Holmes. We are rested. We had improvement week last week. I used it as a chance to improve on myself. In what areas, I'm not exactly sure. But hey, hopefully you improved during improvement week. It was very silly to have a bye week after 2 games against the MAC. I was joking, it's back-to-back, MAC-to-MAC. Who needs to rest after that? I think ideally the Buckeyes would have played. They didn't. Ryan Day's not in control of that. He's not an excuse maker, so he just said, hey, we're going to improve, and it's on to Marshall. And this week we now focus on the Marshall Thundering Herd. Little tough for me to get up for this game. It's tough to find the juice because you have MAC Marshall, not the sexiest start to the season. Next week, Michigan State. The Big Ten is here. Boom. Now we're rolling. So it's kind of one last game for me. This feels like preseason football, a chance for the Buckeyes to keep working the kinks out, play some depth, stay healthy. No big deal. But when I look at these early games, I want to talk about something about the role of ego on a football team. Because Ryan Day has a good job. It pays well. And he has an embarrassment of talent. It's good to be Ryan Day. You'd rather be Ryan Day than the head coach of North Texas, no doubt. But one of the biggest challenges when you're Ryan Day, or if you were Chuck Daly on the 92 Dream Team, or any head coach in this situation, is taking care of egos. I've been in sports now for, 20 years, actually. Yeah, 20 years. ESPN was 2004, so 20 years. I've dealt with a lot of arrogant people in sports. Many of them I get it, because their head was pumped full from the time they were an 11-year-old playing Little League, and they got an ego fed to them their whole lives. There are other people that I meet, and sometimes I call it misplaced arrogance. I'm kind of thinking, wow, where'd that come from? But one of the reasons we love football is because it's the ultimate team game where you have to set ego aside. It's the ultimate team game. You need 11 guys in unison on every single play. And think about it. Other sports aren't like that. Baseball has 10 guys on the field at once. 1 in the batter's box, 9 in the diamond. And you know what? On every play, there's 3 or 4 guys doing the work and 6 or 7 guys standing around. Probably just describe your workplace. You can understand that. And yes, I understand that the left fielder is supposed to back up the shortstop, yada, yada. You get my point. Basketball. You can be a really good basketball player, and it is a team game, no doubt. No doubt. But you watch the NBA, it's a lot of iso ball. It's a lot of me against him. That's the way it is. Soccer. I know soccer fans are yelling at me right now. Look, when that ball's in the other team's box, there are 3 or 4 guys standing around midfield waiting for a clear. My point is this, that football is the ultimate drop your ego game. And I think that's why we look at football differently than other sports, because if you say what makes a great baseball player, you look at 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, batting average. It's all about the numbers. Same with basketball. Basketball has more about championships, but a lot about the numbers too. Football, it is all about Super Bowls and all about national championships. It's the ultimate team sport, sacrificing yourself, sacrificing ego to the team. And the reason I bring that up is because on this roster, for this Buckeye team to be as good as they're going to be or want to be, they have to do that. Think about Travion Henderson. And I want to be clear. Travion Henderson, from a character standpoint, is about as good as it gets on this team. Great dude. So this is not me saying he's not doing well. But Travion Henderson is the guy, the incumbent. Quinshon Judkins comes in. He has more carries, more yards, more touchdowns right out of the gate. Think about Emeka Egbuka. You are in one of the most talented wide receiver rooms in all of football, all of college football history. You wait 3 years to be the man. And this teenager comes in, barely old enough to buy a scratch-off, and the teenager is leading the league in catches, yards, and touchdowns, not Emeka Egbuka. And if you don't know the teenager's name, you downloaded the wrong podcast. Of course, we're talking Jeremiah Smith. So for guys like Travion Henderson, guys like Emeka Egbuka, who are clear leaders on this team, not only statistically, as they expect, but more spiritually, emotionally, you have to sacrifice your ego. And if the Buckeyes want to win a championship, that's what it comes down to. It is easy to sacrifice your ego when you look across the sideline and it's Michigan, Penn State, or Oregon. It is very easy to be all about the team on those Saturdays when you feel it in the stadium that everything is about winning. But when it's Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, those are the days where players just want to get theirs. I want my touches. I want my touchdowns. And that's why Urban Meyer, Ryan Day, they've always been about brotherhood, brotherhood, brotherhood. That is one of the keys during this stretch of the season. Ryan Day keeping this team together, making sure every player's on the same page. And from the guys I've talked to, including Travion Henderson and Emeka Ibuka, it seems like they are all on the same page when it comes to that. All right, coming up here in just a couple minutes, we have Joshua Perry from NBC. We're going to break down our favorite sports movies and the worst sports movies of all time. Then later in the show, we have Austin Ward from Dotting the I's. We're going to have some fun stories about celebrity interactions on the road. Stay with us. More Buckeye Fever podcast. It's here. The new edition of the Football Fever 2024. This game is unreal. Check out these new features. It's not just game day stuff. It's a ton of fun loaded with all your favorite Buckeye traditions. It even has Dynasty mode. Whoa. Now check out this team. The veteran quarterback surrounded by an all-star cast to break it all down. It's the only game you need this year. The Football Fever 2024. It's the perfect play. Saturday morning at 11 on ABC 6. So moving on to this week, the Ohio State Buckeyes play Marshall, the Thundering Herd. We're going to talk more about the game later in the show. But as for Marshall, when I think about the Thundering Herd, they really have been a good football program. Randy Moss, of course, is the first name that jumps out, but other good players like Byron Leftwich, Chad Pennington. But sadly, what a lot of us think about when we think Marshall is the tragic plane crash that happened back in 1970. If you're not familiar with the story, the Thundering Herd were coming back from a game against, I believe it was East Carolina, when their plane went down, killing all 75 people aboard. And it was just one of the darkest days in college football history. They ended up making a movie about it back in 2006, I want to say. We Are Marshall. And if you haven't seen it, this is a good week to watch it. Check it out if you're not familiar with the story. It really is an inspirational yet sad movie, but a very good sports movie. To talk more about movies and sports, we bring in our next guest here, Joshua Perry. You know him, of course, from NBC and Stadium. Joshua, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, you are a social media superstar. You're also a guy who knows his pop culture. So I want to talk movies with you. We're talking about Marshall this week, and I think about Matthew McConaughey and We Are Marshall. All right. That's what I think of. That's my McConaughey. So when you think about sports movies, let's start with good movies first, then we'll rip on some bad ones. But what are good sports movies that stand out to you?
I mean, the best one for me is Remember the Titans, right? Like, I think, we've all seen that movie. Like, the football part of it, super fun. I think the storyline of unity and how that community was able to come together was really good. But, like, basically from, 6 years old up until I'm 30 right now, you could watch that movie. You could feel really good about it. Also, Denzel Washington, he's phenomenal. Any Given Sunday, another movie that I love. And then how about Jerry Maguire? And that's one I was late to. I was late to that one, but when I watched it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually ran it right back when it ended. I thought it was that good.
Help me, help you, Joshua. Help me. No. So Jerry Maguire. So this is interesting because people think of sports movies like Remember the Titans or Rudy, but Jerry Maguire is a great genre of fringe sports movies where it's not all about sports, but yet it is a sports movie. Like I think of the movie The Wrestler like that, starring Mickey Rourke, which is, is it sports? We could get in that debate, but it's running kind of parallel with sports. Jerry Maguire is sneaky underrated.
It is. I mean, like it was one of those where I felt like every part of that movie, there was something captivating about it. I loved it. The agent storyline, the love story was super interesting in there. Like it was really good. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention also is one of the top sports movies, Sandlot. And that one holds the test of time. That was phenomenal.
So do you get bothered by sports movies? People think I'm a sports anchor, so I must love sports movies. But I'm actually really cynical and critical. I probably hate 80% of sports movies because I look at it like The Legend of Bagger Vance. I love golf, and I'm like, that would never happen like that. I get bothered by it. So as an athlete, do you get bothered by how unrealistic some of these are?
Yes, I avoid them generally. Like it's not my genre because I'm looking at that like, all right, that would never happen. I don't know if you watched the show All-American, but like watching some of them run routes and like that, I'm like, what are we doing out here? Like you couldn't even get an actor that could even remotely feel like he belonged on a football field. So part of it for me is like the sports action is really bad. And then some of the things like just to make the storyline go, I'm like, this could happen in the sports world.
Yeah, Rudy is one that I love because I've always loved the pageantry of Notre Dame. But when I talk to more people, I actually emceed an event where Rudy spoke at. And as I talk to more people, it seems like Rudy's story has grown over time. In fact, I talked to former Ohio State athletic director Gene Smith right before he retired. I said, hey, Gene, the story is that you subbed out for Rudy, and he started laughing. He goes, okay, I came out of the game. He goes, I think as the story's gone on over time, it's been embellished. But Gene goes, I came out of the game and Rudy went in. It's not like Gene Smith put up his arm and said, it's Rudy time. Get him out here.
It's funny because, like, you know, I've got a relationship with Gene. I've never asked him about the Rudy thing, but Jerry DiNardo, who I used to work with at the Big Ten Network, he was a part of the whole Rudy thing, and he refuses to watch the movie. He's like, I know none of this is true. I don't want to be a part of it.
Okay, so how about worst movies? What's something that jumps out to you and you say that movie was absolute trash?
I don't think there's anything worse than Draft Day. And I watch it every year around the draft. Like it's a movie that personally I love to watch, but I know it is a bad football movie. Every part of that movie is something that would not be allowed to happen, from like the little front office relationship that would just like get you fired, as it should, to the idea that you're going to trade away the number one pick. And then during the draft, you're just going to concoct this idea in your mind that you're going to be able to get everybody that you set out to get and save the franchise. The coach is getting ready to quit in the war room. It is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, but it also gets me hyped for Draft Day.
And I love that you watch it every year knowing that the movie sucks. But so let me ask you this. Have you ever known a player that you played with who people didn't go to his birthday party? Isn't that what that whole movie hinged on?
Yeah, like the quarterback, like, hey, did your teammates go to your birthday party? What do you mean? Like, it's one of the craziest things, but I do get it. Like, if I was the GM, it'd be a question I would ask. It would throw kids off, but I just want to know.
So for me, Caddyshack 2, anytime you follow up a classic with no Bill Murray and Rodney Dangerfield, that was trash. All Mighty Ducks sequels, I'm on board with the original, but the Ducks got worse and worse from there. Here's a sleeper movie that no one's actually seen, and I can tell because I looked up the box office. Driven with Sylvester Stallone is this race car movie. And Joshua, I swear on my life, there's a scene in this movie where a car gets flipped in the air, and then the director thought it'd be so cool to have that car go in slow motion. But the cars underneath it are still going regular speed. So in this scene, the car in the air is going slow, and like 72 cars go underneath it. The times don't even match up. That's what I'm talking about with unrealistic movies.
That is amazing.
I love that. Well, Joshua, thanks so much for joining us here. Make sure you check Joshua out on NBC Sports, and he needs to get going to watch Draft Day. Love Joshua Perry. If you're listening to the audio version, it's always a waste of time because Joshua Perry is the best dressed man on television. He was always such a fun player to cover. And I remember he used to do stuff with us when I was at 10 TV, and I would say, you're going to be on TV someday. And now he's this big shot network guy, so we love Joshua. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, before we get to Austin Ward, I do want to talk about the rankings right now in the Big Ten. Because if you look at the preseason rankings, you would be totally convinced that the Big Ten is as good as it gets. Right now, they have 7 ranked teams, so that's more than a quarter of the top 25. They make up 4 teams in the top 11. I'm not saying the Big Ten is not a great conference. I think it will be a great conference at year end. Here is all I'm going to say. Indulge me for a minute as I old guy rant against preseason rankings. I think preseason rankings are the stupidest thing in all of sports. And there are a lot of dumb things in sports. Here's how I would say preseason rankings are. And this is why I don't put a lot of stock into week 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had my way, if I were the commissioner, I would have rankings come out, the first rankings around week 6. Let us play half the season before we rank anyone. And I get we won't do it because college football is all about debate, and that's fine. I'm now about to debate the debate. So this is going to go very meta in a hurry. But this is the way I look at college football preseason and early season rankings. It is like if you read a restaurant review for a restaurant that opens next week. Think about that. Let's vote on all the college football teams who haven't played a game yet. What do we have to base it on? Reputation, recruiting rankings, how many starters came back. what part of the country I live in. But think about how silly it is that we rank these college football teams before we've ever seen them play. And the reason I don't like it is because if you start in the top 10, you have to, I'll put it this way. It's the college football burden of proof, like in a murder trial. If you start in the top 10, you must prove that you're bad beyond a reasonable doubt, because we spend all season wanting to justify our confirmation bias. If I have a team ranked in the top 10, I want to stand by that. I want to get take lock. I want to stick by what I thought because we're more worried about proving how smart we are as voters. So it's like if you're in the top 10, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt you don't belong. And the flip side of that is if you start unranked, you spend all season trying to prove that you actually do belong. Let's take that murder trial metaphor one step further. This would be like let's say you're at a murder trial and the judge comes in, the defendant comes in, and the judge looks over at the jury and says, all right, before we hear any evidence whatsoever, by a show of hands, who thinks this clown is guilty? I mean, that is college football preseason rankings. Let's rank a bunch of teams we've never seen play. We can make a case that in week 11 and 12, college football is an imperfect system. Because still, they don't have like opponents. We really don't know which region's better than the other region, which team's better than the other team. To do that this early in the season, I just think is foolish. So if you are Utah or Toledo or Northern Illinois, your 12-0 will never be as good as their 11-1. And I do think that's a problem. It's like voting for homecoming queen. You can't possibly know all 300 people in your class. So who do you vote for? In my case, you vote for Megan Hoops because your last name is Holmes, her name's Hoops. You've been at the locker next to her for the last 7 years, and she hasn't even noticed you. All right, sorry, this shouldn't turn into therapy. That was a hypothetical. Kind of. But here's what I'm saying, is you can't know everyone in your class and you vote for homecoming queen. You can't know every team in college football and you vote in the polls. So let's just not freak out about early season rankings here. In college football, the easiest way to climb the mountain is to be born at the top. Right now, 7 ranked teams in the Big Ten, but let's let this thing play out before we really know who's good and who's not. We have Austin Ward coming up next. We're going to break down celebrity interactions on the road. Stay with us. More Buckeye Fever podcast coming up. So this week the Buckeyes play Marshall. I have a soft spot in my heart for Marshall for a very odd reason, because my middle name is Marshall. So when you grow up and your middle name's Marshall, that means people on the playground call you Marshmallow. But as you get older, people compare you to Marshall Mathers. And when Eminem became big, I remember I was so happy that there was Marshall representation out there for a guy like me. And it was one day when I was covering a Michigan game, apologies, Columbus, but when I worked in Toledo, I covered Michigan, and I went up to the big house. And it was the primetime game, the night where Eminem was on the broadcast with Kirk Herbstreit, the famous meme of him acting like he's drunk or high or both. And I run into Marshall, Eminem, on the sidelines as he's being escorted. And I said, hey, Eminem, I'm a huge fan. He kind of, he didn't blow me off to be mean. He was just had people screaming at him. And I said, my middle name's Marshall. And he turns around and he says, for real? I said, yeah. I pull out my driver's license. I said, my name's Marshall. And he said something to the effect of like, Marshall stick together, and gave me like a bump. And it was probably the coolest moment of my life. So for more celebrity interaction stories, we bring in a celebrity himself, Austin Ward from the podcast and Dottie DI. So, Austin, first off, my brush with fame there with Eminem. Yeah. It's so impressive. Have you ever, in your time covering the Buckeyes, or even not covering the Buckeyes, had a celebrity interaction?
The things that I get to be a fan of, like music and professional wrestling, which I know I'm speaking your language. All so right. I feel like, had a few interactions in the last couple years with professional wrestling that made me think that these are some of the coolest celebrities that you can possibly meet, because they really care about their fans. They don't have a job without the fan base. Mm-hmm. So they need it. And I, like last year when SmackDown was coming in, my daughter Liberty was really getting into it. And Cody Rhodes' daughter is named Liberty. So she wanted to make a sign. She said, this Liberty loves you too. Cody, I'm a Liberty too. She couldn't figure it out. She was workshopping the ideas. Yeah. But she made it. And I took a picture of her making the sign. Now we're on the way down there to, is this at Nationwide? I think this one was at Nationwide. She's in the parking garage. She's, so we're the whole thing. She's getting ready to meet Cody, and Cody's interacting with it. And then we're on the hard cam side, down by the floor. They take the sign away. You're not allowed to have any signs down there. She's crushed. She's standing in the entryway.
Yeah.
Cody's not going to be able to see this. And so I sent out one more message and like, well, security was, really throwing around their weight. Took the sign from a 7-year-old girl who wanted to meet Cody Rhodes.
Yeah.
Cody sees it, sends messages like, where are you guys at? Sometimes they do that because of the hard cam. I'm like, yeah, I know that. I kind of exaggerated a little bit. But I say, we're right here. We're in this section. He said, all right, well, don't worry. Well, I've seen the sign. We'll take care of that. And like, first match is going on. Somebody comes down the aisle. Said, is Liberty sitting here? She's right here. He sent out these people with the Wrestle Buddies. It's autographed, autographed T-shirt.
Wow.
Autographed thing. He said, Cody's going to come out for you later. But, he wanted to make sure that you knew that he saw the sign and he's got this stuff for you and he appreciates you. So like, he's got to get ready for his match tonight. But afterwards, Cody's going to come over here and meet you. And so sure enough, after the main event, it's a dark match on that night. He comes down the aisle and he's looking, he's like counting the rows. Like, are you Liberty? And she's like, yes. She's like, that is so cool. My daughter's named Liberty. And, that's awesome that you're a big fan. Like, I'm so glad to meet you. Do you have anything else that you need me to sign? And she brought, a trading card, other things, and huge hug. Like, changed, this is the greatest night of my life.
He's a face in real life. That's really, really cool. I'm trying to think, who else have I run into? One time when I was in New York City, I saw this guy walking toward me, and he had a blonde on each arm, literally his arm around 2 blondes. And this guy looked like death as he walked toward me. I'm like, how did this guy pull this off? And it was Gene Simmons as I got close. And that made sense as he walked by. I kind of gave him a tip of the cap as if, well done, sir. Well done, Gene. See, other interactions. I mean, I guess I had one where I ran into Usher. This is on the street.
I believe it's Ursh.
Yes, Ursh. This is a great story. So we're out now. I'm not credentialed, Austin, but technically we were covering the Rose Bowl. So we're in LA. We're on Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills, and it's New Year's Eve. And this car pulls up. It's like an old convertible, and Usher is in there with a fur coat and a top hat on, just looking absurd. He pulls up, and I go, "Hey, it's Usher." And at that point, about 10 girls shopping whip their heads around and start screaming. They jump on the hood of his car and they're taking selfies. Usher looks over at me and he goes, "I blame you for this." And of all the comebacks in my life, this is the one I'm most proud of. I said, "Dude, you're driving down Rodeo Drive on New Year's Eve with a fur coat and a top hat. You wanted to be Usher tonight." He laughs. He goes, "You're probably right." And he drives off. And I'm like, that's the coolest interaction ever. Usher just out there flaunting all of his Urshness on Rodeo Drive.
I was out in Las Vegas for my bachelor party, and we were at Hard Rock. I don't know how we got there or why. I would never go back there again.
You probably don't remember how or why.
But we're getting, let's get out of here. Like, this is not the place we need to be.
Yeah.
Like, all right, we're getting this cab. Back when you had to do that, there was no Uber option. That's how long ago I've been blessed to be married. So this cab pulls up, and Nick Lachey is climbing out of it.
There we go.
The same, like, low rent cab that we're about to get in, and he gets out, and I said, "Hey, that guy used to be Nick Lachey." And he turns around.
That's the biggest backhanded compliment ever.
He turns around and he would like to say something more. And the rest of the, my bachelor party, I invited my sister and my brother-in-law out there. So like, it was a kind of a mixed company, but they're like, "Get in and let's get out of here before
you insult 98 degrees.
Before this gets even worse." I was like, because he's pretty far removed from actually having any cachet at that point.
Yes.
But so that was a real brief one. But that one does always stick in my mind because it's like, I kind of probably didn't need to be doing that.
Well, to our younger listeners, of which I'm sure there are many, Nick Lachey is the guy who, before he hosted Love is Blind, used to sing in a boy band, because now people know him for Netflix Love is Blind.
And a lot of other reality shows after that, including when he was married to Jessica Simpson.
Newlyweds.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Well, this week the Buckeyes play Marshall, and maybe we'll keep our eyes on the sidelines, and maybe we'll see a celebrity down there besides Austin Ward. It's here, the new edition of the Football Fever 2024. This game is unreal. Check out these new features. It's not just game day stuff. It's a ton of fun, loaded with all your favorite Buckeye traditions. It even has Dynasty mode. Now check out this team. The veteran quarterback surrounded by an all-star cast to break it all down. It's the only game you need this year. The Football Fever 2024. It's the perfect play. Saturday morning at 11 on ABC 6. You know, the funny thing is I actually had one other interaction with Usher. He was doing the national anthem at an NBA Finals game in Cleveland. Usher owned like 0.007% of the Cavs. He was doing the national anthem, and I was getting ready to do a live shot. This is when I worked at the ABC station in Toledo. And I get ready to go live, and one of Usher's handlers comes over to me and starts yelling at me, "You can't go live, you can't go live." Usher's about to practice in the background, the national anthem, and Usher's wearing shorts. Usher's handler was very concerned about him being filmed in shorts. And I said, well, I'm live in 90 seconds. It's going to be a 45-second hit. So I'll be done in 1 minute. Can Usher just wait 1 minute? She said, no, he's not waiting 1 minute, yada, yada. And so I said, I don't know what to tell you. I'm about to go live regardless. So sure enough, I go live, and she kind of waves Usher off so he doesn't do his national anthem practice. After this happens, Usher comes over to me and he says, hey, what was going on there? And I told him, and he apologized. Hey, she thinks she's just trying to help. So Usher, I've now met you twice, and you are 2 for 2 in being a good guy. So shout out to Usher, shout out to Austin Ward, shout out as well to Joshua Perry for coming by here on episode 4 of the Buckeye Fever podcast. The preseason, as I like to call it, is just about over. Buckeyes are about to go 3-0 against Marshall. And then, finally, we're on to the Big Ten and Michigan State, another green team next week. Thanks again for listening to us on episode 4. Leave us a 5-star review if you would, and tell your friends to subscribe. I'm Dave Holmes. We'll see you back here next week on the Buckeye Fever podcast.